You so much. I think, price and profitability has been something that as we travel across the state of Queensland, we're hearing more and more about. And we know that certainly cost of living is becoming something that's really front of mind for businesses, whether that's in, someone selling goods or, even in hospitality or any type of customer service facing industry or alternatively in trades. And it really is across the board. We hear more and more from small business about the fact that, their margins are shrinking and they're looking for advice and guidance about what to do about that. So tonight we're really lucky that we have two experts in their industries. We have Paul Zahra from the Australian Retailers Association and Malcolm Richards from Master Electricians Australia. I'm actually going to hand over to you both to tell me a little bit about what you're hearing in your industry, especially when it comes to, what are the top challenges people are experiencing and how does that play out for price? So Paul, what does that look like in the retail and hospitality space?
Thank you, Dom, and hello everybody that's online tonight. Really special at 6 p.m. on a night that's got other options for you to be watching. Look, I think it's in my entire retail career, I've not seen this collision really of a cost of living crisis that's impacting consumers, but the cost of doing business crisis that's impacting retailers or businesses just generally. And unfortunately, it is across the board, and you'd be all feeling that. It's whether it's wages or energy or rent, it's across the board. And as a result, this collision is happening. And retailers, particularly small business retailers, are really doing it tough. And we're looking at ways to sort of how do you survive in this situation. So what we know is consumers are now really slowing down their discretionary spend. We're seeing that in the ABS data immediately. And it goes a bit like this. My history was running a department store. So we've the beauty is that you get to see firsthand what happens when it comes to discretionary retail, because nothing in a department store is there's nothing that's sold that you need. It's what you want, as opposed to food in a supermarket. And what we're seeing right now is that people are shopping, have stopped shopping or slow down their shopping for their home, which has had a significant impact. Household spending for the home is in double-digit decline. Then they stop shopping for their men, because 75% of shopping is done by women. And then they stop shopping for the children. Then they finally stop shopping for themselves. And then they just start shopping for cosmetics, because cosmetics is the only sort of industry that continues right through, because you can update your wardrobe quite quickly. So it's quite fascinating to see this occur. But people are doing it tough. Small business particularly, because we just don't have the margins that a large business would have, and there's just nowhere to go. So, it comes then now to making sure that you review your operation, and pricing has a big part to play.
And Malcolm, what are you seeing in terms of trades at the moment?
Thanks, Zahra, and thanks for the invite tonight, and good evening, everyone. Look, I don't disagree with anything Paul said from the retail side. Being a service industry where we represent electrical contractors, and many of our members are small business, mum and dad contractors or 5 to 10 employees, we're seeing a lot of diversity in the industry. We're on the back of catching up from 2 years of work that wasn't done through COVID. And then in addition to that, we've got some other factors coming in, such as the ability for Australia to hit net zero has put a huge load on our workforce, particularly in sectors like industrial and commercial areas, but not so much in housing and customer retail side. So we're seeing a lot of volatility in the industry, where some sectors are really flat out working hard and others have really slowed in these recent times, where they're really impacted by those cost of living issues. So our members have certainly adjusted, and many of them have moved their businesses into sectors where there is some growth opportunities to take advantage of that, to keep their businesses profitable during this time.
It's interesting that obviously it's impacting both sort of sectors in very similar ways in terms of that volatility and just sort of not knowing what's coming next. When it comes to price, and Malcolm, I might just go to you on this. I mean, what are the things that small businesses don't often factor in? Because, they've got a service. It can be hard to value your own time when you're pricing that. What are the things that they should be considering to make sure they're getting it right?
Well, we have seen right across the board some significant rises in our charge-out rates. We survey our members every year, and we've seen 8 and 10% increases over the last 2 years. But within that, if we unpack the numbers, we do see a lot of diversity where some prices haven't changed in 3 or 4 years, and others have escalated by double that rate to give us that general average increase. Some of the numbers we've unpacked in that survey is the cost of the inputs into business. We've seen substantial increases in the cost of products. So the power points, the switches, and all the bits and pieces that go into the electrical work, we're looking at 20 to 25% increases in a lot of that gear in the last few years. Staffing and labour shortages were absolutely terrible last year, and we saw 10 to 15% increases in the real wages in our industry because of the demand and the skill shortages. So keeping on top of those rates is critical for a business. And that's what many of our members have done, which has led to the significant price charge-out rate increases over those last few years.
And Paul, obviously where you're, in a business that's potentially subject to supply chain and those costs that are being passed down or, as you mentioned, electricity costs. I mean, is there a method for, when you look at how do you price a product or something that you're selling, do you look at those ongoing costs and sort of factor in a percentage when you're setting price?
Well, you definitely need to be across the pricing, and unfortunately, a lot of small business owners just accept a price increase from their suppliers without actually even questioning it, and that's one of the big lessons I think that hopefully people get out of today is that they need to have their supply base explain why the price is going up because there's a bit of media hype, and as a result. There are many people in the supply chain that have just taken prices up because they can, but it's really important that they're able to articulate why, and that you do have alternative that if you've well researched to know that there's other alternatives, so you can do that competitive check just to make sure you're not overpaying, and that's the risk for a small business that you are just accepting those price increases. In all of that, those cost inputs have to be put in place. You need to be across all that level of detail, and it's very painful because it's all sort of coming at one time just to make sure you're actually maintaining your margins. Otherwise, you've got, you want to make sure your business is sustainable for a start, that you're then being able to make those decisions around what do you look for cost reductions, what prices, what do you pass on to the customer, who ultimately has to wear the increased cost situation. So it is a difficult time, and I think in my opinion, most of those cost increases have already happened, and you're probably dealing with those. And I think if there's other price increases that come up now, they should be always questions. I think coming out of the pandemic, there was lots of supply chain disruption, lots of issues to do with shipping and containers, etc. Most of those issues have settled down quite considerably, and we are seeing less disruption to the supply chain. So in the supply chain area, we're actually starting to see some prices coming down, which is quite a bit of a relief, to be honest.
Just on that, before I jump to Malcolm, is there a particular percentage on a product in terms of, like if you're a healthy retailer or a
Yes.
healthy hospital, is there a particular percentage of
Yes,
margin that you should
definitely.
be aiming for?
There's a percentage by category, and you should know what that is, and you should know what the category is that you actually you operate in, because there are greater margins on some categories. There's less margins on others. So knowing that particular percentage is important. So then you can always benchmark yourself to know whether you're actually meeting that margin percentage or not. Now, we're going to talk about pricing a bit, I know, in this conversation, but some things in a retail store are what we call price sensitive. The minute you change the price, people are going to notice, they're going to make a decision. And every time you increase the price, you have the risk of losing a customer. So it's not just simple about passing everything on to the consumer. So, and I'm going to use a cafe example here, Dom, if I may, because I think all of us on the call would know what they pay for a coffee at their local cafe. It's really price sensitive. So, with coffee, And you know, the mix in actually making sure when you do price increases, you've got to be conscious about sort of predicting the future as well, because you don't want to do them too regularly, because it does tend to piss people off. So, you know, there's things that are price sensitive. You might have to sometimes take a bit of a squeeze on, look at other ways, and we can talk about that. How do you actually overcome that when you've got to take a price increase? And there's other things that are less price sensitive. And using the cafe example, actually a piece of cake, buying a cake, a slice of cake is not price sensitive, because you don't know. It comes down to the quality, the flavors, the ingredients, most of which you can't tell on appearance. So there's less price sensitivity. So you've got more opportunity in taking the price up on a slice of cake than you would on a cup of coffee. So there's some tips and tricks you can do to work out, you know, what it comes down to is that overall mix in what you're selling is that if you're making less on something, you've got to make it up somewhere else. And that's really the strategy. It's sort of retail 101, but often small business owners don't think it's through. They think they just got to apply it and increase across the board, rather than looking at the actual mix of what they're selling, the business mix, and saying, well, I can take a price increase here. I need to sort of take a haircut on this particular item because it will actually impact traffic. Now, the coffee example is a good one, because what coffee does, it actually drives traffic into your cafe to sell other things. So if you get that coffee pricing wrong, then you could lose that customer completely. Take out the cake example, but it could be lunch or dinner, whatever else you're selling in that cafe. So yeah.
It's really helpful. Malcolm, are margins similar when it comes to trades? You know, is there a particular percentage that's sort of like the, you know, the silver bullet?
Well, we certainly have markup on electrical product, and there is a real cost of supplying product. And this often becomes an issue when a small business is communicating to their customers, when they can see and search and find a product online, and often the online product they find will be half the price of a genuine high quality product, but they don't look at the whole life cost. So sometimes there's a real challenge for a small business to communicate with their customers the whole of life cost of a quality product in our industry, plus all the costs for the contractor to obtain, store, supply and maintain that product for the warranty periods after it. So that does become a real challenge, but most of the contractors do learn over time how to sell the value of their complete service and try and eliminate. We talk a lot to our membership about not quoting charge out rates and those sort of things, but actually deal with the whole value they're bringing to the customer and what that investment will be and what value that'll bring to them at the end of the day. And if that all else fails, we're getting down to Paul's coffee shop to buy some decent cake to sweeten them over with that deal.
Wonderful. And I think, you know, obviously, Paul, you mentioned that there are some sort of tips and tricks around that. I mean, to both of you, I don't mind who goes first, but I mean, what are those tips and tricks? I mean, how do you know what that item is that you can put up versus the item that you
Yes.
absolutely
Yeah.
can't?
I'm going to continue, Dom, with the cafe example, because it's probably the simplest one for us all to get our head around. But I do think you've got to do a competitive review. So if you're in a cafe in a high street or in a shopping centre, you need to know what others are doing. So sometimes it's got to be the first mover, but you need to make sure that you don't ever need to be the cheapest. You don't need to be, but you don't want to be the most expensive. That's the whole thing. You got to get it's that just right principle. And then I think there's ways to sweeten the situation through little things, and some cafes do, offering a loyalty card so that when you get your 10th coffee, it's for free. Now, many cafes do that, but they rarely offer the card to a customer. So they should be asking at the point of sale when you buy a coffee, actually stamping your first thing and saying, Madam or sir, here's your coffee card. Please come back and join us. You get the 10th coffee free. That's a way of getting around the fact that the price. So then they're thinking, okay, I've just paid. Maybe, Dom, you can tell me what's a cup of coffee in your local
Oh,
Queensland
well, I
cafe?
mean, literally, it could be anything from kind of $5 to $8 at this
Well, that's the
point.
point, right? And
Yeah.
like, who would have thought we're going to pay $5 for a coffee? But that's now become the standard, and you can be up to $8. So you sort of start to think, well, actually, you've got to work out those ways. Then there's ways around saying, well, actually, how can I package this up so I make it more enticing? Maybe I can have a coffee and cake deal that if you buy coffee and cake, you're going to get, it's a $9.95 deal. So there's ways to actually say, well, I'm paying a little bit more, but I can pay a couple of extra dollars. I'm actually going to get a slice of cake. So there's those sorts of ways to actually make things a bit more enticing. But it comes down, small business are in a unique position because they can offer, it comes down to making sure you offer the best service possible. Now, in that coffee example that you're greeting, I mean, the cafe where I'm working to, the gentleman, the barista that actually made my coffee one morning, I didn't go back, didn't greet me, didn't say good morning, didn't like those real personable things really count, because big stores can't do that. You know, they're big spaces for them to cover. So small businesses have really got to offer that that really personable service and work out ways to make sure that they ensure that that customer comes back, remembering the coffee that the person's ordered. You know, that people want to be acknowledged. If they know that you're an almond latte and you turn up, you know, that immediately just wins people over. There's small things, don't cost a lot. If you can get those sorts of simple tricks done, you'll get that return customer.
Does that play out in trades, Malcolm, in terms of like, you know, obviously customer service, offering a different, you know, or better sort of, you know, point of difference to say, you know, one electrician to another? You know, how does that work out for you guys?
Absolutely, and that's an area we've been educating on membership. I'll quickly talk about 3 different pricing strategies that our industry generically uses. So the charge at hourly rate is one that's very common in service and maintenance type areas, where it's how long you're on site and what's the hourly rate, and that's how much the bill ends up because of that. But the problem with that strategy is you then get compared against the next contractor on your price. And the reality is you might work twice as good or twice as fast than your competitor, but you're being measured on your price. The second version, which is often in the construction industry, is the price per point. So what does it cost to fully install a power point, a light fitting, a switchboard? And there's some risk to that in the contract, that there's an onus on them to be completing their work in a timely, quality manner, because now they're being compared to their competitors on the completed product. And you see the change over there. The best strategy in our industry, and one, if I can, while Paul's talking a lot about copy, I'm going to talk about solar panels. So when's the last time you bought a solar panel for your house and you paid an hourly rate for someone to install it? It doesn't happen. When you're buying a solar panel, you've seen the ads on TV, $3,500, I'll get a 5 kilowatt solar and a free upgrade on my inverter. And with that, my power bill will be very small. My return on investment will be 3.5 years. So this is a value-based strategy. So the contractors have got a bit smarter and said, I'm going to bring value to you as a customer. Here's the value. In the back end, they'll be working out what their hourly rate is, pack it all together, but adopting a professional sales strategy to bring value to the customer. And of course, that comes with a level investment. And that's taken the industry down another pathway of providing easy ways for the customers to pay on terms or other ways to meet that investment. Sometimes they hedge that against the savings from the solar, and we're getting a great solution for the customer where they're not putting out a lot of capital and they're helping the environment and getting a great asset put onto their family home. So there's 3 key strategies which work really well. The only other one that Paul mentioned is there are a range of contractors who will turn up and do a free home safety check or one of these issues, and they'll often letterbox the area, and you get the contractor in, they'll do an assessment, such as some of the motoring companies will do a check on your car. And there's a hope from those contractors that when the customer asks for a free home safety check, there will be some work needed to be done, and the contractor will come back and pick up the difference in the subsequent work they do to fix up the home. So that's another strategy that is used successfully in our industry to actually gain customers, gain work, and get the job done.
And so if I'm a small business, how do I ask for more? I mean, we get it all the time. I can't ask my customers, you know, the fear, as you said, Paul, about, you know, if I price the coffee too high, then they're going to stop coming. They're going to go to my competitor. You know, obviously there are some alternatives to price hikes. I mean, you might shrink your hours that you're open to save on other costs, but you know, at the end of the day, you've got to trade to make money. How do I ask, and then how do I tell people in a nice way that I have to do it?
Look, it's a really, really good question, and I think it's a bit it's horses for courses, because it depends on what type of business you're in. I sort of have a rule of thumb when it comes to price increases. You don't want to do them too often, ideally. So there's some people might say you want to do them incrementally and go in small stages. I don't have that view. I think the minute you increase the price, people notice, and you don't want to be doing them more than once a year. So I'm interested in what Malcolm has to say, actually, because very different industries, but you want to do it once and do it respectfully and quietly. Now, when I say that, I use those words because you've got to respect that you're now into somebody's household budget and they have to then make choices. But, you know, I've gone into seen some retailers that have actually put up pricing notices about price increases coming, and then that notice will be up for 6 months after the price increase. And I've walked in and thought, I didn't know it was
Oh,
cheaper before.
yeah.
Yeah, so you've got to be careful around how you communicate it, because you know you could be communicating to somebody that actually doesn't even notice there was a price increase. So you all of a told them you've already all of a sudden telling them that you're more expensive. So it's one of those things that I think it depends what it is. It's in some categories it's good to put up a customer notice to advise people. Once you've done it, really after 4 weeks, I would be removing it. I would not be communicating beyond that point. The other way of doing it, which is why I say quietly, another way is actually just to have sound bites and be prepared when customers ask. So, and you can explain. So, I've done this many times in my career where, you know, we've taken products that are really price sensitive up in price. What I've made sure is the sales team understood why, and there was a reason behind it. So when the customer says, well, I was paying, and this is a good example where I'll use this example actually in a department store where selling a moisturizer that was priced at $9.99. It was a high volume private label product that everybody that really had a high popularity. They're moving from that $9.99, which is a really key price point, to $12.99 is a really difficult move. But at some point you've got to do it, and because costs had gone up. So as long as you can explain why, and then be prepared to answer customer queries rather than just saying I don't know, the price has gone up. So it comes down to how you handle the conversation. Depends what sector you're in. My advice is just to narrow it down and be prepared to answer questions. That's the way I would go.
Mal,
And
how often do you put them up?
oh,
Can you do
sorry,
it once a year?
from my side, just to answer the first question, it's the easiest strategy with most of our members who have direct relationships with their customers is when they adopt a new customer, they introduce the higher pricing for the new customer, but then often
Yes.
a one-on-one discussion with an existing customer explaining the changes. And look, last year, the year before, most of our members were dealing with increasing their prices 3 or 4 times a year in line with their input costs that were increasing at the same time. So there is some key difference there. I will say, though, that looking through the data from our industry, we're a different industry to the products in a shop, and people could compare the same product and just change on price. There is a correlation between pricing and perspective of what a business looks like, and often the higher price a contractor charges out within a certain limit can generate a perception that they're a higher quality contractor and actually lead to more work. So some of our members have feared putting their prices up because of the inverse relationship with customers, but actually found a benefit from putting their price up to the upper band of the industry. And a good term long contractor that's been in place for a while will actually see that their workload may increase and give them the flexibility to customer select. Which customers do they want to work for? Which ones do they fear they won't be paid? Or which ones are going to argue the price down, and they can select the right customers and just work for them.
It's really good advice. I think, you know, as we found recently from the Griffith Tax Clinic in particular, that they report that in effect, if a business has mild or zero in their business, then they're 80% less likely to become insolvent. And as we travel around, obviously tax is front of mind for small business right now, especially with some of the things that have come out in the federal budget around, you know, the ATO looking to recover some of those sort of costs. How do you go in factoring in things like tax when it comes to pricing? And, you know, in my mind, it should be quite a significant consideration, because you know it's that cost that's always, you know, going to get you somewhere. Do you have a view on that at all?
I certainly do, and we do a lot of education with our members at understanding the entire cost of their business. So we provide a calculator for our members to calculate their costs. It involves working out the total yearly cost of the employee, equipping that employee and training them and tooling them up with everything they need, but then also how many employees do you charge out to your customers, and adopting their share of the total business cost. Divide all that by how many work hours in a year, and make sure you're on top of your productivity, so you're aware how many of their working hours you can charge to the customer, and then you come up with a baseline for what your charge out rate should be. So in that was the share of the employee's cost to the business cost. So you have to be fully aware of all the issues like rent, training, tax, all of these different bits and pieces. And the easiest way to stay on top of all of that is to have a competent management system. So we not only recommend Xero, Tradify, one of those, but we also have good works management systems that I think last time I read 73% of our membership uses an electronic system to manage their business. And I don't know how you would operate without one of those. I'll tell my members a story. Recently, I was in Garden City Shopping Centre. I walked into the bathroom, an entire plumber's diary was sitting on the bench. Every day of that diary had his customers, the phone numbers, the dollar amounts and everything. And I was, I opened the book up, looked for his number, rang him up and went and found him, and the sweat beating down his face because he'd lost everything in his business. But I'd be horrified that he wouldn't know his total business cost because he isn't tracking them and looking at them through a system that will give him a final answer at the end of the year, so he can make sure that every one of those little additional administrative costs is going into that hourly rate that is going to the customer to be covered.
Paul, in your space, I mean, what tech is sort of essential to small business?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure I can make any as software recommendations, but I was just thinking, Malcolm, that was a really good ad there, by the way. Look, I think the larger retailers, obviously, they have their own customized systems, and I'm sure through either Xero or MYOB, there'll be all these programs that you can use. I haven't used them personally because I've over the years, I've actually been dealing, and you can simply use an Excel spreadsheet, to be really honest. There's another way if you don't want to invest in a software program. But I think, picking up Malcolm's point, it's just important you're across your business in such that level of detail, because all you need is one cost input to go off kilter, and it can actually send a particular trading day in or a job into loss making. So important that you're educating. There's financial literacy amongst the people that you're working with, so they can understand what they're doing, and that you're across all of those inputs, and that you make sure you can account for every cent. So you don't want to be in a small business working super hard and then losing money. That's the whole point, I guess, and that's what you don't want to see.
And so when we sort of look to the future, I mean, obviously, we hear lots of sort of noise at the moment around, recession and all sorts of sort of doom and gloom. I mean, how do you plan to survive or to thrive in a market like this? I mean, what are the things that you should be looking at in terms of indicators?
Yeah. So look, I'm not an economist. I would be surprised if we end up in a recession. The only reason why I say that is that we still have full employment, and in fact, the inflation rate came out today, and it's not great because it's up there. It's ticked up again to 6.8%. So that tells me that we haven't actually. The Reserve Bank and retail community don't work hand in hand, because Reserve Bank want to stop spending or suppress spending or control spending, and retailers want people to continue spending. So. Look, the advice right now is actually customer that is under, particularly those with mortgages, which is the majority or most Australians, they're under significant pressure. So you need to focus on value and making sure that your business really has a value, particularly value aspect to it. So, because people will be shopping on price, and because they're not sure whether they can afford it or not. So it's so important that you're driving that value messaging in everything that you do. Now, whether that's that offering a special lunch deal, or it comes down to doing, again, using that cafe example, offering something for that consumer that might be little pressed for coins, that you can actually offer them something that you still make money on, but you might have to sell more of to make up the gross profit dollars, and that you've got something on offer for them. What you don't want to happen is that consumer just doesn't come into your store at all. So value is the key. That's the important bit. Now, if you're in the, there are many retailers that actually already operate in that value chain at the lower end. They are going to do actually pretty well if they can get all the marketing right. And then there's those that are actually at the more premium end. If you're in a premium end, then you need to be conscious that those people shopping on luxury goods are going to feel guilty about it. So how you treat them and make sure that it's not overt is going to be really important, because that luxury customer or the premium customer will continue to shop regardless of the economy. But most of us would fit in that middle market to the lower end, and that's where we need to make sure we're just adjusting our messaging and making sure we're focusing on that value messaging.
From our perspective, Dominic, sometimes adversity brings an opportunity. As tight as the market is and as strapped for cash as people are, we've just heard yesterday we're looking at a 25% increase in our power bills. And what that actually drives for our industry is a renewed interest in solar and other opportunities to reduce your bill. So again, coming back to our members and small business reading the market, seeing where the market's moving, and understanding that I've got to be ready to adopt some of these new technologies and provide a different solution, maybe to my existing customers, and remarket back to my existing customers who are doing it tough, but presenting them with an opportunity that says, for an investment which we can organise some terms for you, we can get rid of that power bill and save and help you on your cost of living at this point in time. And another really big one coming at us at the moment is electric vehicles. Every time an electric vehicle is purchased, there's a range of infrastructure needed to charge it, be it in the home, the workplace. And so there's a whole change in perspective from our industry on these new opportunities. So we need our businesses to be agile, not think they can stick to everything that was always working for them, and think what might work for me next year, and get my business ready to move forward into those new opportunities. Go and do a training course, go and learn some more about some special kit, and how am I going to sell this new product to my existing customers.
Wonderful. I just want to remind everyone that you can put questions in the chat as well if you've got any questions for our guests. But I guess, both of you before talked about, I think briefly around sort of discounting and things like that. I mean, how dangerous is a race to the bottom where, you get too many people in the market underpricing, undercutting each other? What does that do, sort of to the health of those businesses, and how do you combat that if you find yourself in that space?
That is difficult and a really interesting question, because unfortunately during times where things are tough, there is going to be more discounting. So small business can't compete with the big retailers that can do lots of discounting to drive traffic. I think you've got to be conscious. Ideally, it's great if you're selling something that's unique, because that solves the problem. But there are other ways. If you're selling, and I'll use this example where small business owners can get around this sometimes, is that if you're a toy shop example and you're selling Lego and your discount department store is constantly having 25% off, then it's a good thing to go and just ask the question, Lego, do you provide any specific product that's not available in the broader retail? And they do, a lot of the large companies do have unique offers that they do small quantities of, that actually prefer to put them into a small business owner. So when they're discounting, you don't need to, because they don't have the same product. So if you can get that unique point of differences, it's really highly valuable. And then sometimes you've just got to be able to wear the pain, because you've got to remain competitive. You can't not discount if your competitors are. So you just have to be conscious about where you choose to do that, and be selective around where you need to do that to drive traffic in stores. So it is a dangerous place to be. It's a drug. Once you're on it, it's hard to get off. It's highly addictive. And the important thing is that you only do it selectively and strategically where you need to do it to drive traffic.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Cost leadership strategies rarely work in our industry. They're designed for mass market. If you're selling some cheap shampoo to get them in the door to buy something else, when you're dealing with electrical contracting, you do run a risk of being too cheap, that the perception you're putting in the marketplace is the word that's attached to cheap in our industry is dodgy. And when you're playing with electricity, you don't want to be engaging with a dodgy contractor to get your work done. You'll always be lying awake at night wondering if that work's safe and is going to keep working. Unfortunately, there's a sector of our industry who starts to struggle with their business, probably because of other reasons. They're not marketing well, or they're not charging the right rates. and their response to not doing well is to drop their price, and then they start a spiral where they go and they're working 100 hours a week and they're still making a loss, and it all crashes in a heap sooner or later. So all of the long-term successful businesses in our industry have good, respectable prices that they value for the quality work they do, and they survive long-term. So we just put a big cross through the cost leadership strategy in our industry, and we'll leave it to Qantas to sell cheap airfares. There's another free plug for you, Paul.
Thanks, Malcolm. I was going to add one other thing to that, Dom. I also think that you've got, as a small business owner, you've really got to star on service because you can. And I think that's where you may win customers that don't shop. Not everybody shops on price. If they know they've got a relationship with you, that they're also keen to make sure that the service is great. Those little touches, that making sure that how the goods are wrapped, how they, being able to offer gift wrapping, particularly through gift giving times, those types of things make a big difference for somebody that's really time poor and wants a problem solved. So, it's not always about discounting, but, making sure you've got that value offering in your business is really important. So you've got those key price points to allow people to shop that are shopping at the lower end, that there's something for them to buy.
We just had one question, and it's, how do I know, like if I got my pricing strategy right? So if I put it up, can I go back? And then also, how long do I wait to work out, if that's the right pricing strategy?
This is a really good question because I think, and I'll mention what Malcolm has to say here, because I think once you go up, it's really hard to come back but you can, but you lose a little bit of face. So you've got to be very careful. You've got to have done your research and your review. And the issue with price increases is that, yes, there will be some pain initially, but people do get over it. So, it's one of those things you can't panic because it could take, depends what sector you're in. It could take you a full year to anniversarize that before you actually can assess it. But that's why you only want to do, my view is that you do price increases no more than once a year, unless you're forced in for other reason. In building, etc., there's probably more of a reason to do that. But in the retail industry, the price comparison's too easy. So getting back to your question, Dom, is really around, I'm not sure I've answered it for you because it's a complex one, but you can then do, if you go up in price and you've seen out a period of time and you think actually it's wrong, you can come down. It's not a great look, but you can come down, or you can do promotional activity where you might offer a promotion for a period of time to pick up that customer that may not be happy with the price increase.
If I can answer it from the other perspective, it's about the customer. And one of the things we try and do is do the persona of what a good customer is. So we encourage our members to look at their customer base and say, what is your ideal customer? What do they look like? What age, what demographics, what geographical location? And really kind of have focus in on that customer. And one of the hardest things for our small businesses to learn is when to say no. You're actually not my ideal customer. I can see this is going to end in pain down the track. So I'm going to push you to the side and I'm going to focus on my core business there. And if I've done the research and I'm selling the value, then the price won't really be the problem. So if they're knocking back on price, maybe they're in that other bucket of the wrong customer for me, and it's a self-select out exercise. And we don't generally in our industry have the issue of the mass market where everyone can see your price and compare with everyone else. It's more that one-on-one relationship with a builder, with a customer, where you can really communicate the value.
Wonderful. Well, we haven't had any other questions, but I will just go out for last questions. If anyone wants to put something in the chat, I'm happy to ask our wonderful guests. But if not, I'm going to let you all go and watch the football. No, nothing. All right.
Well, I can see.
We've got one. Sorry.
I don't know if you can see it, but I can see one from an electrical contractor. I don't completely understand it. In case I miss one, is there a list of business indicators, labour efficiency, job profitability, cash flow, or somewhat? Sorry, there's a see more button there. I might click on to see if that can help me. How can we learn more about these without doing a full business licensing course, maybe a micro course? And actually, if I do go into a shameless plug, Master Electricians does a bit of that work, and we do some talk on getting paid on time and how to set up your business and do some other things there. So I'm happy to connect with that individual if they want to contact me, where we do run a micro course to actually help, which is built from the key mistakes small business makes along the way, which we've learned because we've dealt with so many small businesses for so long, that we've unpacked that and put it into a bit of a program to help small business succeed. And it's all about, how do I calculate my charge out right? What pricing strategy do I adopt? How do I get paid on time? We got the 6 top tips for getting paid on time and all these sorts of things to try and help new young businesses survive, not damage the industry by trying to lower their prices, but actually lead to a better quality industry. Sorry about the shameless plug.
No, you're fine. You've caused a flurry. So,
oh dear.
Yeah. So what advice would you give a new electrical business with pricing that does R&M, residential and commercial work?
R&M, residential, sorry.
Yes, it just says R&M. So I'm going to say residential and maintenance, maybe? Or it can't be that, right? So that does R&M, residential and commercial work. Someone might clarify for me. Repairs and main.
Repairs and maintenance. So we're in the sector there, which is probably going to be charging an hourly rate, do and charge type market for residential and commercial. So the key thing with that sort of a business is to be acutely aware of your business costs. So have a good management system that stores and tracks all of your costs, so you're absolutely aware how much it costs to put an individual. Be very aware of your profitability, which is, you're paying your work of 1,876 work hours in a year. How many of those hours are you charging to your customer, which gives you your profitability? From that point in time, then you've got to make a decision on what type of business you are and what pricing strategy you want, which should lead you to say, I want to be seen as a quality contractor in the industry, which would then, so I'd probably price it at a little bit of a premium above that, and go to the market and be very good at my sales and upselling the quality work I do, and test that price in the market and see how it goes. So now's probably a good time because there seems to be strong demand in that sector at the moment. So I'm keen to see how that would work out.
So Paul, talking about doing competitive checks on prices with supply, is there a possible way that you can negotiate price with suppliers when you as a business don't have purchase power yet?
That is a little tough, but it doesn't stop you from shopping around. So if I'll use the cafe example, if it's coffee beans, then obviously you should look at other suppliers so you can actually do comparisons, because those small changes can make a massive difference to your profitability when you're selling high volume. If it's a unique supplier that nobody else supplies, then I think you've got to get into having an open conversation to say, and just be direct and honest, saying, look, we've got some cost. We're looking at our cost inputs. There's cost of doing business pressures. Is this the best price you can do? Go and do a negotiation course, because you'll learn all those tips, because even just asking directly. Now, if they're not prepared to do that, often they're not prepared to reduce price, but they're open to changing the terms of payment. And that makes a massive difference to cash flow for a small business. So if you're on a 7 days net and you can get that to 30 days payment, that makes a massive difference. And there's value in that. That's almost a discount in itself, because you're not having to hand the cash over. In the ideal scenario, you've sold the product before you've got to pay the supplier. That's what you want to be involved in. So if you don't ask, you don't get. It's something to be really important thinking about. This is you should always ask the question.
Thank you. Malcolm, MEA provides great support on labour charge-out rates, but there is little detail on material markup. How do you suggest material markup is calculated with all items with different prices?
So that really comes down to what is the cost to the business to order, maintain and store that product on behalf of the customers. And of course, there is some data from the industry about what the averages are in that mark. So I think Paul spoke earlier about different sectors and different charge out rates, mark out rates. So our sector is operating somewhere around the 25% markup on product at this point in time. And that's probably higher than it normally is, because of the issues we've had with supply chain in the last few years, and also some of the dramatic increases in prices for basic products in the last few years, and the ability to pass those increased prices on to customers has reduced some of those margins. So at this stage, it really is up to calculating all of those costs to your business and the lost productivity of doing that and attaching it to all the product. But the industry averages through our survey currently around the 25% mark.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the questions, unless we're going to have a second flurry. Oh, we just did. Okay. So I would sum up the pricing issue as being about three factors. A, how is my product service perceived by the customer? B, how is my delivery or that perceived by the customer? And C, how do they stack up versus competition? All the perception of the customer. This is why customer service is important. This must be a statement. You can't afford to be inward looking. You must be customer focused. Does that sound right to you both?
That sounds like a good summary, a really good summary from Jonathan. So thank you, Jonathan. You should be on the panel next time.
Exactly. And I've spoke a number of times tonight about how the price you charge can actually paint a perception of the quality of your business to your customer base, especially in our industry more than others, where when you first contact an electrical contractor or a plumber or someone else, and if they're very confident, they know what they're doing, and then they're very confident around their pricing that you will get a quality valued product and the value they'll bring to you, then the perception that's received by the customer is that you must be worth it. You've been in business for a long time, your brand's well known, and that's your rates. When they receive that other price from a competitor, which is half yours, and they're late on their quote and they don't turn up on time and everything else, they'll very quickly develop the alternative picture of your competitor. So stay the high ground, get your pricing right, get your perception to your customers ideal.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. You're getting wonderful feedback in the chat, as you can both see, and everybody is saying that it's an incredibly insightful session. So we're very lucky to have you, and thank you for giving up your time.
Thank you, Dominic.